Hello, impressive souls, and welcome to a new episode of Live Your Impressivity Show. I'm Alex Badita, and I'm your host. This podcast is all about journaling, and in this season, we're talking leadership journaling and how to use the power of writing to make your business thrive. We have guest experts coming to share with us different tips on how to succeed in your business and also how to bring journaling more and more into your day-to-day routine. Today, I'm talking with my special guest, Pauliina Rasi. Pauliina is a copywriter, communication strategist, and the founder of Pauliina Rasi Communications. With over 15 years of experience as a journalist and communications consultant, she has helped dozens of mission-driven organizations to take their success to the next level. Pauliina is passionate about helping small businesses with mighty missions to turn their vision of a better world into reality. And she harnesses her passion for communication and her expertise in journalism and public relations to make that happen. Remember to bring your pen and paper, take notes during this episode, and let's dive into talking with Pauliina about content, copywriting, and journaling. Welcome back, everyone, for a new episode of Live Your Impressivity Show. And as you know, in this second season, I keep reminding you that it's all about business journaling, leadership journaling. And honestly, in today's world where there is so much competition, and especially in the digital world where we have a lot of content happening and going on, we have to distinguish our brand in a way. And that way is through content creation and copywriting. And I couldn't think of a better person than Pauliina to come and share with us about copywriting and content. Welcome, Pauliina. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I'm excited to be here with you today.
I want to share a little bit with our listeners today because I already mentioned in your bio about what you do. And I'm really, really excited to have you and to be connected with you because we met online, I think, more than a year ago. And then we discovered that we share so many things in common. We have a common background in journalism, and we even worked for the same publishing company. I was working, of course, for the division in Romania. You were working for the Finnish division. And of course, you are also born in Finland, which is one of my favorite countries ever since I studied there. So there were so many connections. And then on top of that, we share the big passion for words.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a funny coincidence that we used to work for the same company and also the love for Finland or the Finnish connection. But I've been excited to be connected with you as well because it's been fascinating to follow how you turn journaling into a consistent practice because it can be, of course, something we do very informally, but the way you've transformed it into a profession and a way to improve many aspects of your life, it's really great.
Yeah, and it goes down to words and to expressing. And I think this is really, really powerful. And I actually want to start our conversation today with this, because in the world where we have to deal with so much distraction and so much content and so much, like a lower attention span, and people are caught in so many directions. And also social media platforms are promoting more visual content and video content. Why do we still need words?
That's a very good question, and that's a very good analysis of the current situation as well. For me personally, if I start from that, writing and words, that they have always been a way to make sense of our world. And that still stays the power of the words. And where the power of the words stems from is that they can help us understand the situation, understand ourselves, understand what's going on and how to move forward in a way that other forms of media maybe don't. Blogs, for example, though they might feel a bit ancient at times when you have all the audiovisual and interactive content formats popping up, they still allow us a chance to stop and pause and reflect on a topic a little bit differently. maybe our attention spans have got a little bit shorter. And I see it in myself as well when I'm scrolling on LinkedIn or on social media, that I tend to jump from one topic to another. And in that context, sometimes reading a longer piece of text, it can feel a little bit daunting or very time consuming. But what I see in my own habits, and also, well, with many other people I speak with, is that when we really look for something trustworthy, when we wish to learn more about the topic, that's when we still direct back in the direction of words and longer form texts.
That's a really good point. And I think that having this in mind and knowing that words and written content is still the go-to for a trustworthy resource is something for all businesses to consider. And I was thinking, for someone who's just starting out, for entrepreneurs or startup businesses, what is the main thing that they need to know about content writing and copywriting? Because it's definitely important. We already understand that. What is the first thing that they need to know when they start out?
Definitely, it's super important to have that, and I believe it's also something, like you said, that many understand and they consider it. But maybe the first thing I would like to say for anyone who is thinking about getting started is that they will probably feel a bit overwhelmed at some times. And it's probably because they are trying to do a little bit too much. So even to get started with copywriting and content, you don't need to do everything at once, and you don't need to have all the bells and whistles from the get-go. It's so easy to compare yourself to bigger brands, so entrepreneurs who are just way ahead of you. So don't get lost in all that. Many entrepreneurs and even bigger businesses, they can get away with quite little when they are focusing on the right things. A website is still a must for most businesses. Of course, there's no one size fits all, but still for most businesses and most entrepreneurs, a website or at least a simple landing page, something on their own, is needed. But on top of that, you can just have maybe a blog with occasional articles. It doesn't need to be daily or even weekly. And then one social media channel. You don't need to go all in from the first day. You can then figure out what works and take it from there step by step when you have more resources, more help, and more time.
So you're saying that it's not necessarily to have a content strategy from the beginning. Is it more about testing and trying and experimenting and then creating a more solid strategy? Or should we have something in place for at least the first few months?
It's always a good idea to have some sort of strategy. It doesn't need to be anything too thorough or too exhausting. It's something that you can put together in a couple of hours or half a day. So I do recommend having some kind of strategy, because it's also a strategy question to decide which social media platform you choose if you only choose one. But then also in the early stages, especially if you don't have clients yet, maybe content or content marketing isn't the first place to invest in, because in order for it to work, you need to know a little bit of who your clients are, what are they looking for, what are the arguments that resonate with them, and it might take some time to figure out those basic business questions first. And if you start with content and writing and words, it's easy to put a lot of time and effort and even money on that without really seeing much results. So it's good to think about when the right moment to invest in content and marketing is.
What would be the signs to look for in order to know when it's time to invest more time and energy and to kind of take our content writing to the next level?
Well, what I see with my one-to-one clients and also with my online program participants, when I help them create their content strategy and content marketing strategy, is that usually the good moment is when they have already the first good client experiences. Of course, for a service-based business, that can take a few months. If you offer consulting or coaching that lasts 3 months, for example, it can take some time. For product-based businesses, it can happen more quickly if you already have a product and it's just a question of getting it to the market. But usually when you already have some sort of client flow, you know where those clients clients come from, and you know how your clients speak about your service or your product, because you need that information. You need to know which words they use, how they talk about their problems, how they talk about the possible solutions, because that will directly translate into your content, whatever platform you're on.
I love that. And I think that's really important to highlight, because knowing how to address your audience comes from actually knowing your audience and really connecting with them on that level. So what would you say is the biggest challenge that businesses have when it comes to creating content?
Well, the first one, I believe, is the overwhelm and getting too scattered, not knowing what to do, being a little bit either doing nothing because they don't know where to go, or being a little bit all over the place because they are trying to do everything and they don't have resources for that, and you don't get results like that either. So here we come back to the strategy and the importance of having even a very light strategy in place, knowing what you're doing, why you're doing that, and how long you're going to test that before potentially moving to something else. But then very quickly after that comes the question about the knowing the clients and zoning into who they are, what they want, what they need. Because often when I get, for example, when I start on a copywriting project, one of the first questions is, who are your clients? What does your product mean to them? What is the pain point? What is the one pain point that they are struggling with? And sometimes I'm surprised to find that they don't know. It might be the first time they're asking themselves that question. And everything really stems from there, because then once you have answers to those questions, it's easier to test different things. It's easier to scale up. You can bring on paid advertisement, paid promotions, all kind of things that don't make sense earlier in the process.
So actually, those are really, really good questions. And maybe it would be a good idea for people and entrepreneurs to start writing them maybe in a journal and to answer to those before they start creating content. So everyone who's listening, if you didn't pay attention, just pause and go back and listen and write down those questions, because they're super, super powerful. And that way you can start writing in your business journal about your audience before you start creating the real content that will get to them.
Absolutely. And journaling can be a great way to work on your strategy as well, because it allows you to let everything come out in a way before you start then mapping things more in a more structured way.
That's a really good point. And actually, how would be a best strategy or technique to kind of get more ideas or to feel inspired?
That's a fantastic question. I think that journaling and different kind of free flow writing, I think there are different ways to call something that's more or less similar, are a great way to get started with any creative block. It can be when you start thinking about your strategy, or it can also be when you work on, let's say, a specific piece of content and is trying to come up with ideas or possible ways to approach a topic. My favorite is just to sit down and set a timer for 10-15 minutes. I wouldn't say longer, because then if you try to force it too long, it might feel daunting as well. And just let everything out on a paper. Some people like typing. I like, in this kind of context, I like writing at hand, because somehow there's this mind-body connection. I feel I literally get the ideas out. And sometimes before you get those ideas out, you can't move to the next step. And I just spoke with someone who had participated in my online program last autumn, and they had actually used a journaling kind of tactic when they went through the worksheets. And on the first round, they just journaled down everything that came to mind about that topic. And they went through the program and then came back to the beginning and started taking a more structured approach. So sometimes it's very important just to get everything out of your chest and out of your mind.
That's awesome. And that's a really, really good point, and a really great example of how journaling can work and how it can help you to get connected to those ideas, and especially when you feel blocked. I think that, having also some guiding questions can help. And especially, as you mentioned from your program, having some prompts, some exercises that will lead you to bringing out that creative inspiration, those creative ideas, is really going to make a difference. And I'm also curious to know, before you get to the point where you sit down in front of your journal or in front of your computer to type out ideas, if you are still stuck, what do you do to get that inspiration? Where do you find that, outside of your office space? How can you get inspired? What do you do, Pauliina? And what would you recommend for people to do?
One of my favorites is going on a walk or going on a run, and bring your iPhone or anything with you that you can either type or record. I'm that crazy person who takes voice notes on my run or on my walk. And then people look at me like, okay, why is she talking to herself? But well, that's me if you stumble upon me on the way. But for me, really getting movement, it's the biggest, it's really for me, it's the biggest thing. And I also like meditation, and many of my clients find meditation a good way to get started. Sit down and focus on your breathing, or just focus on, of course there are many techniques, focus on yourself for a while, and then once you're calm, centered, focused, then it's maybe the time for the creativity to pop up as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that's both techniques of movement and stillness. They can be very helpful in different moments. And that's really, really beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about a topic that is really important, and I haven't seen people talking about it that much. And it's something that I've learned from you in the past year, and I have been applying it for myself: repurposing content. So could you share a little bit more on that, and why is it important and how we can do it better?
I'm happy to hear that it's been helpful for you and something that you started to implement, because repurposing is magic. It's really magic, especially for small teams, for solopreneurs, for all of us who have 2 million things on our plates at any given moment. The idea is very simple. If somebody's not familiar with the name, maybe the idea is very simple. When you have any kind of content, a blog post, a podcast interview, anything, you can use it in countless different ways. For example, a blog post can be reshared multiple times through social media. You can take snippets, bits and bobs out of it and use them as nice graphs. A podcast episode, of course, you can take sound bites and publish them as posts on social media. You can take quotes, you can share it through your email list and newsletter. Only the sky is the limit. You can really do anything. But it's important to get strategic and consistent about that as well, because if you don't think about it, it's easy just to do that piece once and never think about it again. So I have two main tools or main strategies to help with that. The first one is building a content plan, a content structure on a monthly basis, bi-monthly basis, whatever works for your rhythm. And then already map out certain things that you are doing on a continuous basis. To give a very simple example, I publish my posts on Thursdays, and then usually a Thursday after that, I publish it again, or I create a tip carousel for LinkedIn or a tip post for another social media platform. And then the next month, I do something like that again. And I have it in my plan, so I know it's coming. I don't forget about it. And what can be really helpful is that you created those bits and pieces. Once you create the initial piece of content, once you finish recording a podcast episode, for example, you can already, if you have time, sit down and write a couple of social media updates, maybe try to find a couple of sound bites or quotes that you would like to use, once it's still fresh in your head and in your mind. So you don't have to come back to it a month later when you've already been doing tons of other things and you don't remember what were the highlights.
I really love that. And guys, if you are not connected with Pauliina yet, go ahead and follow her on LinkedIn, and also check out her blog. You will have the link in the description, because her tips are just pure gold. And I'm learning so much. And especially this part with repurposing has totally changed my life, and it made it so much easier for me to create content based on all the things that I have been creating before. Because as you said, it's so easy to just post it, create something, post it, and then forget about it, move on, because we have ideas, we have new things happening all the time, and we want to get them out there. This also brings me to something that I have noticed in myself, and I'm sure that many of our listeners might resonate with. What is the best balance between batching content, creating a big batch of content from the start and then just distributing and posting it, or when you feel inspired to just go and write something and post it right away? Is there a balance, or is there just one specific way that we should do it?
Of course, there isn't any one size fits all, and it depends a lot on your personality and on your personal schedules and rhythms as well. I always recommend some form of batching because there's a lot of evergreen stuff that you can create at once. It saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of headspace, it saves you from a lot of overwhelm. But what is the correct balance? It depends a lot on how much time you have at your disposal, how, if you maybe have somebody else helping you, because then typically having, let's say, a graphic designer or somebody scheduling your content, that requires a little bit more structure, a little bit more planning ahead. But I would recommend at least some kind of a maybe 50-50 balance. I'm not a strict fan of any kind of strict numbers because, well, what works for you maybe doesn't work for me, and vice versa. But usually if you do at least half of the stuff in advance, it already helps massively with that planning and with that time saving and all that. And another form that I often recommend for my clients, especially if they are a little bit reluctant to batch and they feel like they can't really plan ahead, is to just plan what you're going to do in terms of, let's say that having a structure, you publish something every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Mondays, it's maybe something evergreen that you manage to create. And on Wednesdays, it's very flexible, but you know it's going to be something personal, for example. And on Fridays, it's going to be curated content or sharing somebody else's post or something like that. So you have a little bit of an idea what it will be. So it takes already a big charge off your chest and gets you going, but it doesn't, it's not too constricting either, because you don't want to set those boundaries for yourself just for nothing, just to have a structure, but give yourself a little bit of freedom and flexibility as well.
I think that's a really good balance for myself as well. I can totally see myself doing that and finding theme days and then connecting from there to what I want to post, because it can be very overwhelming sometimes. And I know that many people feel like this, and I know that I get that as well. There are so many golden nuggets that you're already sharing with us. And I would like to know if there were 3 tips or 3 secrets that you would share with someone to make their life easier when it comes to content creation. What are the top 3 tips from Pauliina?
Fantastic. I repeat myself maybe a little bit, but the first one would really be to look very closely and very carefully at where you're spending your time. It's okay to do less as long as it's high quality and it's consistent. Doing something even once a week or twice a week is better than doing something daily if you can keep up with that rhythm. So I know it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and get lost in what everybody else is doing, but focus on those few key things and do them well would be my first tip. The second one would be listen to yourself and do what works for you. Because there are, again, countless of things that you could do, but a big part, especially for small businesses, solopreneurs, individual professionals even, the biggest strength that you have is really your own personality. You don't need to do something because everybody else is doing that. Trust in your own instincts and what works for you and what feels good for you. And thirdly, I would say get help as early as you can. It can also, of course, be this kind of easier said than done situations. But as early as you can get some help, it allows you to then focus on those key pieces and still scale your content, reach a bigger audience, and make a bigger impact. It can be something very easy to get started with, maybe someone who helps you schedule your stuff, or even an automated system that does some of that for you, and investing in right systems and investing in right tools in the early stages until you're in a place where you can maybe have someone write for you or repurpose content for you. And even then, take it step by step. You don't need to get there in a day. It'll happen organically.
Oh, I love it. So much gold. Okay, so I wrote down just as a recap. So first of all, focus on one thing at a time. Listen to yourself. Don't try to be like everyone else. and get help, outsource, make your life easier.
Absolutely. And then it also vacates your time to work more with clients. And especially if all that content and marketing and all that isn't your thing, it's somebody else's thing. And you do you, and then you take on somebody else to help you with that part of business.
Yes, that's such a good reminder to focus on your core gifts and talents, because there are other people who their core gifts and talents are the things that you maybe don't like to do. That's really, really good. Thank you for the reminder. I know that some people who are listening now, maybe new entrepreneurs, maybe just starting out, or maybe even entrepreneurs who already have a longer time in business, who are continuously launching products, services, or different projects, might need new content or might need to think about their branding. And I want to go to the aspect of tone of voice, because I know it's important to recognize the tone of voice of a brand. What is the best way to do that? Is it something that we need to get perfect from the beginning, or can we change, adapt, be flexible along the way and kind of, figure it out?
That's a great question. And indeed, the tone of voice, it's a huge part of all things branding, communication, content. It's important to have some kind of idea, well, not even some kind of idea, but a clear idea from the beginning of what your brand is like. What is your brand personality? Of course, there's the whole visual side of things as well, but in terms of tone of voice, what does your brand sound like? But that being said, it is also something that changes over time, when maybe your audience changes a little bit, maybe your services change a little bit. So it's not something that you create once and it stays like that forever or the next 5 years. But it's important to have that idea from the beginning, and then let some time for it to evolve. And that's also one step where I really see that a professional help, branding expert, whatever is the angle you're approaching it from, whether it's branding or more like communication and content writing, but that's really where having some help can be useful, because we are so close to these things as entrepreneurs and founders. And it doesn't even need necessarily to be a branding professional every time. It can be another entrepreneur, someone who knows you well, an accountability partner. You can get that kind of support if hiring someone to help you is not an option.
So it's basically going to look at the brand first, figuring out your audience, and then discovering what is the best way to communicate what you're doing and connecting to that audience. And I think that's really, really good and really important to keep in mind, especially when it comes to reviewing our business and our brand. And as you said, everything changes. We evolve as a business. Our business evolves, our brand evolves. So of course it might change. I remember I was also reading in one of your blog posts about the difference between the tone of voice, between how we communicate to a direct customer or how we communicate to a business. Could you share a little bit on that? Because I already read the blog post, but I want our listeners to also hear it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's something that concerns especially businesses who sell to other businesses and who work with bigger businesses, because especially if your client is a bigger company or they have several contact people, well, several levels of people that you're interacting with, it's very important to think about who is the reader of your content, who is the in the receiving end of your content, because it's not always the user, it's himself or herself. It can be an assistant or a project manager or somebody else along the line. So the tone of voice also needs to be mindful of that. Of course, we often talk about this as a B2B or B2C kind of question or division. I don't think it's so much of that, because of course in the B2C market you can have someone who is buying the product and not using it. Typically parents buying clothes for their children. The children is the end user, but the parent would be the one making the purchase and making that decision. But think about that difference, whatever your brand is dealing with, who is the real person in the other end. But also it's important to keep in mind that even though we often talk about B2C and B2B, it's still always H to H, human to human. And there is a person, it's not some faceless business to whom you need to speak in a very formal and corporate way necessarily unless your clients are like that. It's also a possibility, but it's less and less. It happens less and less.
I think that's a really, really great point, that we are talking to humans, and that's something that very many times we can lose sight of, that, at the end of the receptive message is actually another person reading. It's not just the screen, it's not just the laptop that we're typing out our content and there are robots out there reading it. There are actual humans with emotions and who need to feel that it is addressed to them. That's really, really good. I want to go into the topic of research now, when we have to write something. And also, I know that you also provide copywriting services for other companies. And what is the best way to do research, and how much time should we spend on research, whether it's about copywriting for other brands or even for our brand? Because when we write content, even if we know our services, we still want to do maybe some additional research to be on top of everything, like studies or some theoretical parts, or maybe bringing more perspectives. How long should we spend on research?
That's a good question. I'm of course a big fan of research. My background being in journalism, it's a little bit like second nature to me, is to dive into research and finding some more information before really getting to writing. I would say always do some. Of course, it can be sometimes very light if you're writing about your own topic that you know very well. It can be something very light, but it's always good to have some context so that you can put whatever you're writing about in some context or framework. And that usually typically requires some research. It can be dates, numbers, some history background, whatever makes sense. And another good reason to do some research is to find some links for the SEO, because having links to trusted resources, trusted websites help you with your own search engine optimization as well, which means basically that your blogs and your text will be seen by more people online. So it's another reason why it might make sense to do a little bit of research. And maybe thirdly, we could also add the credibility question, whether it depends. Here we come back to your own expertise, but using some external sources can build your credibility up a little bit. But remember to look for trusted resources and the information that you can really, really trust and vouch for yourself, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there these days. So just Googling your topic and picking up the first link probably won't do.
What is the way that we can choose a trusted source? How can we know if it's just a good website with good SEO that pops up on Google, or it's actually a place where we can get our information and filter it for our content?
Well, that's a good question as well. But of course, you need to look at the website itself and the source. What is it? Who do they say they are? And one question that I think we don't ask ourselves enough is, why are they experts in this? Because just being an entrepreneur or saying that you're an expert in something doesn't make us experts in something necessarily. So really looking at the credentials, at the background, how much other posts they have maybe written, what are they basing their information on? Is it always just themselves? Are there other resources? Are there varied resources, etc.? And it sounds probably a bit laborious at first, but when you start doing that on a regular basis, you can rather easily and rather quickly build your own resource library. So then you always know that, okay, I go to these sites for marketing tips, for example. I go to these news sites, which I found trustworthy. So then you don't need to do that credibility check every single time from scratch.
So building a library of resources, that's such a good tip. And I hope that you guys are taking notes because it's going to make your life so much easier. After you listen to this episode, your content creation will just be so much easier. And of course, after you go and read Pauliina's blog and you follow her, because there are always so many things to learn. Pauliina, what is your routine when it comes to writing and creating content? Because you are always coming up with new ideas. You are always in this space of creativity. When it comes to content, you have to always be, connected. Do you have a routine that keeps you in that space?
I love that question. I'm a big fan of routines and rhythms and structures and systems. So now we are really getting into my comfort zone in a sense. I have this sounds super geeky, I'm aware, but I have a monthly routine where a certain day of a month I roughly plan my content, which means blogs, newsletters, and my LinkedIn posts mainly. I roughly plan what are the topics I'm going to cover, and at that point I might do some background research as well. And that plan is based on that content structure that I mentioned earlier. So there are similar things that repeat themselves week in, week out, month in, month out. So I don't need to start that day with thinking like, what am I going to do this month? I already had those slots to fill, and of course sometimes it changes, but I have that rough idea. That happens once a month. And then there's one day, usually the same week or the week after that, when I write my blog posts and newsletters. It's one half day I have blocked in my calendar every 4 weeks. So it comes up. It's always blocked out. Come hell or high water, it's always there. So that's when I write my blog and newsletter content. And then 2 weeks after that, there's a similar half day block when I create most of my social media content. So having that monthly structure, it sounds maybe a bit geeky indeed, but having one day for planning. So when I get to writing, I know already what I'm going to do, what I'm going to work on, and then having those regular writing days. That's a backbone of my creativity.
So now we know the secret behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that with us. We won't tell anyone.
That's good. Just try creating a system of your own that works for you as well. Would maybe be my next tip. If that sounds a bit too much, it can also be something you do on a weekly basis for smaller batches at a time, for example.
I think that's a really good point. And for me, it has always been difficult to work in batches because I feel like, okay, I need to block this whole time and I need to come up with multiple ideas at a time. And it just the thought of it makes me feel so overwhelmed. But then there are times when I can actually sit down and be in flow. And instead of writing from the beginning to the end, a blog post or an article, I actually have different ideas popping up in my mind. Also, participating in your content circles has helped me to get into that space and block that time and be like, okay, so what do I want to write today? Okay, I need to cover this and this and this. And it really, really helps. So the idea of blocking time is a very good tip. And I hope that everyone can at least give it a try if you're not already doing it. So I know you mentioned that you are doing all three of these next things in different situations, but which one is your favorite? Handwriting, typing, or voice recording?
My favorite is handwriting, really, because it's there I really feel like I'm in my comfort zone. The voice recording is the close second because it's so practical, because my ideas tend to pop up when I'm walking or running somewhere or not, so I don't have my notepad available. But yeah, handwriting is still it for me.
I love that answer. I'm biased because I love handwriting too. So, Pauliina, thank you so much for your time and for all the wisdom that you shared with us. And oh my God, so many things. I took notes. I know that you have already so much content on your blog. And just as a reminder, everyone, go and check out Pauliina's blog. I will link it in the description of this episode. And also go and follow her on LinkedIn because there are so many good things. Thank you so much, Pauliina. And before we end the episode, I have 3 rapid questions that I ask to all of my guests. And I just really want to say once again that I appreciate your time and I'm really grateful for all the wisdom that you shared with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure to be here.
So, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for the nice weather we have today, and I'm also grateful for having a good balance between work and life in general.
How do you impress yourself?
I impress myself by showing up for my business and for my clients every day and working towards my dream on a continuous basis.
I love that. And what would be your definition for living your impressivity?
My definition for living your impressivity would be following your own truth and your own voice and your own dreams, whether they are big, whether they are small. Don't judge them, just follow them. And every step of the way, ask yourself if that's the direction you want to be going in.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much, Pauliina. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Alex.
This is it, guys. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Live Your Impressivity Show. And if you liked it, please do subscribe or leave us a comment, a review, and share the story with people who will also love this type of content. I hope you took notes and you want to share with us also what was your biggest takeaway. Let us know and we will be happy to hear all about your new ways of creating content and taking your business to the next level. I'm Alex Badica, I'm your host, and until next time, I wish you an amazing creative space for all your ideas to bloom, to flourish, to make your big dreams come true. And remember, live your impressivity, impress yourself first, and make sure to take time to enjoy life every day. Until next time, stay impressive.